Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, April 28th through Sunday, May 4th, 2025. So there are some general kind of broad patterns and transitions that are happening right now that I would really love to talk about. First of all, this is the chart starting out this week for Monday, April 28th. You can see that we still have a lot going on in Aries and Pisces, but this is definitely changing, and that's actually what I'd like to talk about. So let's look at the chart. I'm going to show you the chart for 1 month ago and then the chart for 1 month from now. So let's see. This is the chart for Friday, March 28th. And you can see this is really intense. We have this huge cluster. Almost everything is kind of centered on Aries and Pisces. There are a few other exceptions. There's a few other things going on outside of that area. But so much intensity, such a big cluster or stellium in Aries and Pisces. And then going to, again, this is the chart for the start of this week. And then 1 month from now, you can see the chart looks very different. Now we have no planets in Pisces because very soon, later this month in May, Saturn will be entering Aries. And once it does, it really starts this fire dominance. With this chart in particular, there are actually 5 planets, if you include Chiron, in fire signs. 4 in Aries, and then Mars in Leo. And then there's also 5 in air signs as well. Moon, Jupiter, Sun, and Mercury all in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius. So really there are no water planets here and only one earth planet. That would be Uranus, which Uranus is on its way out of Taurus as well. That will be a few months from now. But but my point is we're gradually moving away from this huge Pisces Aries dominance and moving into more of a fire air dominance. Aries will still definitely be very relevant with many planets there. Especially like Saturn and Neptune, for instance. There's going to be this huge Aries era, if you will. But then also, like I said, generally we're moving into a lot of air and fire as we approach Gemini season. I really think it's very nice, though, that we get this kind of intermediate Taurus season. So Taurus season this year, I think, is kind of a breath of fresh air, especially coming from all that intensity we experienced for the last month during Aries and Pisces season. With so many planets there, I think it's really nice to get some, grounded Earth energy to kind of even things out and round things out a bit. We start the week with, Moon exalted in Taurus, for instance, and both Moon and Sun are in agreement. We're just coming off of that new moon that we experienced one day prior on Sunday. So we're still very much in the realm of like this kind of cool, calm energy, very much within the orb of that new moon. And then again, with Moon exalted and Sun in agreement, really harmonious energy. We will see Moon cross over Uranus, which always gets a little bit weird. But we at least start the week off with very harmonious energies. There's a couple other things I wanted to mention as well before we get into the day-by-day forecast. So one thing is that as we start this week, all planets are direct. All planets have been direct, I believe, since Venus stationed direct. I'm just coming back from my hiatus. I'm still reacquainting myself with everything that's going on. But basically, all the planets have been direct. That is changing, though, technically. Later on this week, Pluto will station retrograde. And because it's Pluto that we're talking about, Pluto is so slow. I was just joking about this earlier, but Pluto is so slow that, this whole stationing retrograde process is really going to take, weeks, if that makes sense. I think any planet stationing retrograde or stationing direct takes time, and it's a gradual process. But the most of all is with Pluto. Pluto just takes so long to do anything. And Pluto retrograde, I'm going to be completely honest, it's not, I guess it depends on how you look at it. It could be life-changing, I guess, in the sense that Pluto is such a long-term energy. It can change the direction of history, right? So that's a big deal. On the other hand, Pluto literally spends about half the time retrograde. Okay, Pluto spends more time retrograde than any other planet. So in my personal opinion, in terms of like how I'm going to feel it or how other individuals are going to feel it, I don't think this is life-changing. It is, astrologically significant, though, so it is, of course, worth mentioning. Speaking of Pluto as well, there is this kind of like multiple planet aspect that has been going on. So Mars is still very close to the orb of very close to that opposition that it just made to Pluto. Mars actually opposed Pluto way back in December, and it lasted for a few weeks. That was before the Mars retrograde. And so I think December was very intense for many of us. It was a lot more intense than I predicted. I did not realize how big of a deal Mars opposing Pluto would be, and I want to be transparent about that. But my point is, we're basically coming back to the same type of energy. It is a little bit different because now Mars is direct. It's come out of retrograde. It's moving forward, but it does have to make this opposition one more time. And technically, this happened last week. But I'm bringing it up now because we're still within the orb of that. So in other words, the intensity when it comes to Mars opposite Pluto peaked last week, but we're still experiencing that. We're still coming off of it. And we also had, not just Mars opposing Pluto, but we had that T-square with, Sun in the first few degrees of Taurus as well last week. So last week may have been very intense. I hope everyone is well. I know I'm doing great. I'm doing much better now, and that's why I'm kind of coming back to the channel. But yeah, I think we've had an intense March for sure, and even much of April has been very intense as well. So again, I'm really looking forward to getting to some fun yang energies as we kind of enter May here. Okay, let me go through my checklist. I talked about the T-square, Mars opposite Pluto, all planets direct, Pluto stationing retrograde, fire and air coming. The only other main thing that's about to happen this week is Venus changing sign. So let's get into the day-by-day forecast, and I'll give you all the details of what's going on here. So Monday, April 28th, we did talk about a little bit. I really think it is kind of continuing the themes of Sunday, which is technically out of the scope of this forecast. But basically, we've got the new moon on Sunday, and then in my opinion, the new moon is basically continuing into Monday. You may be able to see like a tiny sliver of the moon around sunrise, I believe, or is it sunset? Maybe fact check me on that. You may be able to see a very slight shimmer of the moon, but otherwise it's basically dark at this time. I've actually been missing the moon. It really hasn't been visible, at least in the early night when I usually look at the sky. The moon has not been visible at all since we've had, like a third quarter moon recently, and the moon in those last stages. So I believe it would be right after sunset that you'd be able to see the moon now. So the moon is gradually coming back into the night sky, but very gradually. We're still in the energy of that new moon, and again, it's very harmonious. Taurus new moon, in my personal opinion, I think the Taurus new moon is the one. It's the new moon where both the sun and the moon are most comfortable, if that makes sense, because moon is exalted, and sun doesn't do too shabby in Taurus either. Taurus is the middle of spring, so it's the middle of the season where not only is there more daylight than darkness, but also the daylight is increasing. So I really think the sun is strong in all the spring signs, even Gemini, even Earth and air where it's not always comfortable, sun does pretty well. So my point is, sun is strong right now, moon is strong right now. Generally, if you can at least satisfy the luminaries, it gives you a good shot at having a good time for everyone, generally speaking. Are there going to be exceptions? Of course, but generally speaking, this looks harmonious to me. This looks nice, and and this new Taurus energy really does balance all that Aries and Pisces we've been experiencing. We still do have a lot of Aries and Pisces. It's not that those are bad energies. The only reason why I would think that we might enjoy some balance is because when you smash a lot of Aries and Pisces together, so I'm going to go back to this chart one more time just to illustrate my point. When I see a chart like this, kind of smashing a lot of Aries and Pisces, and you've got multiple planets at the last degree of Pisces, it just becomes intense because Pisces and Aries are both intense, but in very different ways. So when you add them together, it can be very creative, but also very chaotic. You know what I mean? Water and fire make steam. Both Pisces and Aries, I think, are very conducive toward expansion, but Pisces is also so deep and so sensitive, and Aries is so brash and outgoing. And, I think both are oriented toward beginnings, but Pisces is also kind of integrating a lot and focusing on the past in many ways. And Aries doesn't want to do that at all; it just wants to go forward. So that's where you do get, I don't know, a lot of chaos, a lot of action. So yeah, so I think it's really great that we're entering, this Taurus season, really getting it going with the Taurus new moon. So yeah, things may be stable. Like we're entering this very constructive energy. So so in other words, like all this steam of Pisces and Aries that we experienced last month, that steam may have been chaotic, but it may have kind of like planted seeds, so to speak, or steam can be. I'm trying to make this analogy work. Steam can be good for, I don't know, plants and growing like new seedlings, maybe. So now we're kind of reinforcing things and constructing with this Taurus energy. Let's look at Tuesday, April 29th. So no exact aspects today, but Moon does enter Gemini very early in the day. Something I forgot to mention is I love it when, I think, and I'm not the only one, but when Moon is in all of these signs that it's about to go through this week, this is, excuse me, this is generally the easiest section of the zodiac for the Moon to go through. So starting out this week, Moon starts in Taurus, and by the end of the week, it reaches Leo. So in other words, Moon goes through Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo. Moon's exalted in Taurus. I believe Moon is in joy in Gemini. Moon is in domicile in Cancer, and then Moon does fairly well in Leo as well. So really all of these kind of like spring and early summer signs, Moon has a great time. So that's another great indicator that I'm really excited about, that shows, it suggests, a certain kind of harmoniousness, harmony. It suggests a certain harmony with us on an emotional collective level throughout this week. Yeah, so so that's true for Tuesday as well, but things get a little bit more fun and silly. Moon, I think Moon has the most fun time in Gemini, or we have the most fun time with Moon in Gemini, generally speaking, because Gemini still has like the nuance, the sensitivity, and the intuition that the Moon craves and is comfortable with, but without all the kind of heavy emotion. Gemini just wants to learn and have fun. It doesn't take anything too seriously. So with Moon and Gemini, we can still enjoy the nuanced kind of sensitivity and intellect and intuition, but without having these like really deep emotions that we might with Moon in Earth or water sign, if that makes sense. Not that emotions are bad, they have their time and place, but they can be difficult, as we all know. So yeah, this looks fun. And again, I think it balances out the chart. We still have this Aries and Pisces focus, very creative, very powerful, very chaotic, but we're a little bit more grounded with Sun and Taurus, and we can have fun and kind of learn from things with Moon and Gemini as well. And things are going to be even more fun a little bit later into the week when Moon approaches Jupiter as well. That's going to be a really good time. Okay, let's look at Wednesday. So Wednesday, there is kind of a major headline, so to speak. Venus does leave Pisces and enters Aries. I have mixed feelings about this because we all have our bias. We all have our own personal astrology. I love fire and air energies. I think they're so exciting. They're so fun. With this one, though, in particular, we're moving from Venus being exalted in Pisces to Venus being in fall in Aries. So it kind of just depends on your own personal astrology. Overall, this is kind of difficult. It's unfortunate that we have now, both our greatest benefics are debilitated or kind of messed up right now. So in other words, like Jupiter and Venus are the most beautiful. They literally look the most beautiful in the sky. They are very shiny and sparkly, and it's no coincidence that their meanings, they're just very easy planets. They're not angels necessarily. Like, they do have their downfalls, but generally speaking, they're the most positive, right? So having Jupiter in detriment in Gemini, and then now Venus in detriment in Aries, that does suggest that harmony and that pleasure, that beauty, may be harder to reach, over the next few weeks, especially, or we may have to look to maybe more unusual or unexpected or kind of novel sources for our pleasure and our beauty and for our even our wealth. Venus and Jupiter have much to do with like wealth and, the kind of glamour of life. All of that may be kind of reaching. But on the other hand, the Dutchman energies can be good in the sense that they force us to get outside of the box. That's the analogy that I like to use for Dutchman energies. So when you're outside of the box, you may feel left out, right? You may feel kind of different or foreign or alien. So that's the energy we're talking about here. But on the other hand, you may find a unique perspective from outside the box. You may find something, really rich and unique and just different and unexpected, etc. So maybe something counterculture. So Venus in Aries is great for, just like any Aries placement. It's great for shaking things up and maybe finding something new. And it's also great for, on a subjective level, if you do have kind of any placements in Aries, Venus will bring sort of like gifts to you, so to speak. If you have like Aries Sun, Moon, Rising, if you have Aries Venus, whatever it is, Venus will bring that kind of, it'll shower its gifts upon you. You may feel extra attractive or charismatic. You may find the things that you enjoy easier, But for us in general, though, this is a debilitated energy. So it's I know this is kind of out of season, but any kind of debilitated energy reminds me of Halloween. Reminds me of fall. Fall has the most kind of debilitated transits, generally speaking. But we do sometimes get them this early in the year with, Venus and Aries as well. So, okay, so that's my take on Venus and Aries. But, the only other thing to say on that would be the reason why Venus is in detriment in Aries is because Venus is a, very feminine planet. And I know not all femininity is oriented towards stability per se, but Venus is, and so is the moon for that matter. But, we really see that more crazy side of femininity with Lilith, or I should say wild, because crazy sounds judgmental. We see that wild side with Lilith. Venus and the moon are more about that like stable, like perfect, harmonious side of femininity, if that makes sense. So Venus tends to like more stable signs like Taurus, Libra, even Pisces. These are all, very, very calming and focused on harmony. Aries is a very masculine, kind of outgoing sign. It's very brash, I guess. And Aries is also not known for its like empathy of others. So with Venus and Aries, we can be a little bit selfish. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And with Venus and Aries, we can be a little bit over the top. So rather than focusing on diplomacy and like subtle flirting and things like that, we might be a little gung-ho, like let's just throw it out there, let's put everything on the table. And again, there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just a little bit unusual for Venus, if that makes sense. It's a little bit it can be dysfunctional, I guess you could say. But yeah, there's definitely nothing wrong with it. There's a time and a place for every transit. All right, let's not get too like hippie over that. I'm not gonna focus too much on Wednesday. To be honest, there aren't a lot of aspects. There is a lot going on this week, and I feel like it's a very much a transitional week. But when it comes to the actual like aspects, there's not a lot of aspects just because of the way of the chart is set up. For Thursday, May 1st, technically no aspects, but Moon does enter Cancer very early in the day, close to midnight Eastern Standard Time. So again, I kind of like this. Now that Venus is in Aries, there's really not as much of a Pisces focus. We only have one planet in Pisces now. Really Mercury, Neptune, Venus, and Saturn, or excuse me, Venus, Neptune, and Mercury have all just recently entered Aries. Saturn will soon, later this month, but not quite yet. So yeah, really now there's more of an Aries focus. But I think it's very well balanced with Sun in Taurus, and then now Moon recently in Cancer. I think it's really nice. So right almost at the same time that Venus leaves a water sign, Moon enters a water sign. So it kind of continues this sort of balance, if that makes sense. It keeps things from getting too out of hand. If anything, we're definitely leaning toward Aries right now. So, definitely a lot of new beginnings, a lot of instigation, a lot of, boldness and putting ourselves out there. It's very much early spring energy where, I've seen over the last month. Just how, if you live at a certain latitude, you can see how extreme things can be in Aries, especially looking at it from, the start of Aries is like winter still, and then by the end everything is like blooming and flourishing. Like there's so much dramatic change there. Technically we are in Taurus season, I understand that, but again, there's just so much in Aries. So that's the energy that is really relevant here, I think. Just so much bold expansion and, pioneering. If you're listening to this, you probably understand Aries energy already, but I just wanted to stress that. So yeah, that's the day for that's the energy for Thursday. With Moon in Cancer, we may be very aware of how we feel, for better or for worse. We at least have that kind of clarity. Moon is stepping into a sextile with Sun in Taurus, so this is one of the most harmonious phases of the lunar cycle. We're entering that kind of waxing crescent moon, which is, it literally looks beautiful in the sky, and its meanings are beautiful as well. So yeah, Sun in Taurus, Moon in Cancer, super beautiful. Moon's at home, and both Sun and Moon are in agreement. So generally speaking, there's, everyone kind of has a good day with this. Are there exceptions? Of course. Maybe if you have Sun and Moon opposing, so if you had, like, let's say Scorpio Moon with Capricorn, or Scorpio Sun with Capricorn Moon, you're going to feel like everyone's against you, right? It's going to be more difficult. But generally speaking, for most people, I think this is harmonious. We have that brash Aries energy that I talked about, but it's grounded by these, more soft, more firm Taurus and Cancer luminaries as well. So yeah, a lot going on. It's really interesting. But I think we have, like, kind of just what we need. There's just enough balance. Like, I think there's so much intensity that's still seeping into the beginning of May here. But again, there's enough balance to keep things a little bit more grounded than what we experienced over the last couple months. Okay, let's look at Friday. So Friday, Moon continues through Cancer. So generally it's the same kind of chart, I would say, overall. There is one aspect, though. So Venus conjoins Neptune at 1 degree Aries. This is a funky one because so both Neptune and Venus are just freshly into Aries, right? Neptune entered Aries just a couple weeks ago. Venus entered Aries a couple days ago. So both are at 1 degree Aries, and neither are particularly at home there at all. Neptune's technically not in detriment in Aries, but both Neptune and Venus were way more comfortable in Pisces. Both Neptune and Venus are, I think both Neptune and Venus are comfortable with fantasy. They don't need everything to be figured out. They don't care about, the little details. They just want to have a good time. They're more focused on the vibe, so to speak. And, they're fine with things being ambiguous. Okay. So now throwing them into Aries is very crystal clear. Aries is black and white. There's not really any room for ambiguity. Aries does have a certain level of, like, throwing themselves out there into mystery, so to speak, like, pioneering and, pushing the frontier, pushing the envelope. So I guess there is a certain level of mystery there. But when it comes to the Aries energy itself, it is not mysterious. It is maybe the most black and white out of all the zodiac signs. So putting Venus and Neptune there, it's a strange match. So in other words, Venus and Neptune are kind of meeting. They're having this, relationship, so to speak, this connection where they align. They're in the same place. They are married, so to speak, but they're both unhappy. So it's not that they're unhappy with each other. They agree and align with each other. They're just both in a place that neither of them want to be particularly. So what does that mean? So so the Venus Neptune conjunction itself, that's really great for boosting intuition. So this could actually be really great if you are a creative person, which, if you're listening to this, you probably are. You may be open to new epiphanies or new breakthroughs with your creativity. So, having some kind of new intuitive feeling, some kind of new idea. I don't know, this almost seems strangely Uranian, even though technically Uranus is not involved. It's not a Uranian sign. It just seems like that because, new creativity, new ideas. This may be a little bit more fuzzy and emotional than Uranus, though, so maybe that's a difference. But So anyway, so if you're an artist, if you're a writer, I mean, I think even if you have a very practical job, I think we all have a certain level of like intuition and creativity with what we do each day, or maybe what we do on a more long term level. I would hope so. I think we really benefit from having that intuition kind of guiding us. So, so I would say just be open to kind of the unexpected. You may have some kind of shifts with that creativity or that intuition today, especially if you have placements around 1 degree Aries. I would even say if you have placements around maybe 29, maybe even 28 Pisces, those would be affected by this, or the first few degrees of Aries. Same with the first few degrees of Libra, or even Capricorn or Cancer. You especially would be, I don't know, having a new idea, having a new feeling. I would say be open to it, listen to it, listen for those new ideas, because there can be a lot of value there. But also have not inhibition necessarily. Just have common sense, because Venus and Neptune may not always have common sense, especially in Aries. I think they both may get lost in a feeling or a vibe, and like for better or for worse, this is really bold, creative energy. It just comes out of nowhere. So just understand it and be open to it, and it's probably going to be right for you. But why not just run like a second filter just to make sure? You know what I mean? Because this could be just like crazy energy. Okay, let's go to Saturday. Saturday, May 3rd, Moon enters Leo, actually about halfway through the day. So as it does so, I think the vibe really changes. I think we had like these really nice kind of springtime energies through most of the week, and that just kind of changes. So what do I mean by springtime energies? I mean, with Moon in Cancer and Gemini and even Taurus, like these were all these were all signs where the moon really flourished. So, the moon represents emotion and, nurturing. It's all very like nurturing energy through most of this week. That really changes going into the weekend, because with Moon entering Leo, it's approaching a couple different aspects. The first one will be Moon approaching Mars. So that's obviously, going to be very, very volatile, very aggressive and masculine, very different from what we experienced the rest of the week. Plus, we have just so much fire now. So Chiron, Mercury, Venus, and Neptune all in Aries. Mars has been in Leo, and then now Moon is joining Mars in Leo. So huge fire focus. We do have a little bit of earth, a little bit of air. That's it. There's no one water planet. But yeah, huge fire focus. So yeah, things become a lot more intense, a lot more dramatic. Both Aries and Leo are very intense, dramatic signs, and that's just where most of the focus is. But yeah, this is especially true with Moon. Moon will actually conjoin Mars very late in the day, Eastern time for Saturday. So kind of Saturday night, I guess you could say, for most of us in North America and Europe, where most of my subscribers are. Most of us will have Moon crossing Mars sometime this weekend, probably Saturday. So yeah, that's intense. We may, you yourself, or maybe someone you know, or someone that you see, may kind of just fly off the handle like out of nowhere this weekend. So just beware of that. This isn't all bad. I think Moon and Mars can have a good time in Leo. Especially if you're someone who's not always super confident, this could be really great for boosting your confidence, for having that pride, and this could even be like a very sexual energy, So it's not all bad. I think both Moon and Mars are kind of a double-edged sword. So putting them in this like really fiery, confident sign of Leo, it's a double-edged sword. It could be a lot of fun, could be good party energy, could be good for, having a lot of energy. Let's have fun, let's do something, let's party, let's be sexual or something. It could be good for all that. But on the other hand, like I said, it could be brash, rude, or overly cocky, or mood swings, suddenly becoming aggressive, maybe something small, like a small misunderstanding, or maybe a small rudeness could kind of just spiral into this like big thing, if that makes sense. So just kind of be aware of it, and be aware of it on both sides. It could be uh, aggressive, but it could be a lot of fun too. But it's a lot of energy. Any kind of fire transit, it's a lot of energy, so it can go either way. The other aspect. So one aspect was Moon approaching Mars. The other aspect is that Moon is also approaching the first quarter moon, which is a much more volatile phase than we just were experiencing, like that waxing crescent, and it was so harmonious. And I'm picturing like butterflies and like robins and stuff, like very springtime, right? So we're moving from that into something very different. This is more like volcanoes and like fire and electricity and like a lightning storm or something. So yeah, again, it could be aggressive, violent, chaotic, but it could also be fun. It could be action. It could be starting something new, having the courage to say or do something that you've been thinking about, or I don't know, maybe if you're an athletic person, like having a really intense workout, or I don't know, something like that. It's just a lot of energy either way. But yeah, we are approaching that first quarter moon, so things are becoming more tense, for sure. One last thing about this before we move on to Sunday. As the moon enters Leo, it trines the Venus-Neptune conjunction we were just talking about. So that Venus-Neptune conjunction was exact on Friday, but you can see here it's still... I forgot to use my pointer for this whole video. I'm going to upgrade software, maybe. So hopefully my quality will get better for you guys. But anyway, the Venus-Neptune conjunction at the beginning of Aries is being trined by the moon as well. So this is really interesting. So whatever this like new breakthrough was on Friday, you may actually experience it even more on Saturday, because the moon is kind of activating that aspect, especially with Mars kind of in the vicinity as well. So that's very interesting. So yeah, just be aware of like new feelings, new inspiration, new creativity, new when I say new feelings, could be new emotions, new drives, new instincts, like a new pulse. That's what word came to mind. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It looks very wild and very new, and just part of me is scared by it, but it also looks exciting. So yeah, just be aware of all that. Okay, going to Sunday, May 4th, moon continues on. It's crossed over Mars at this point, but it's still going through Leo, and we actually get that exact first quarter moon. Looks like pretty much midday, just before noon Eastern time. So in other words, Sun at 14 Taurus is squared by the moon at 14 Leo. I always say first quarter moons are underrated. Everyone pays attention to the full moon, and I understand why. The full moon is a big deal, but the first quarter moon is at least as big a deal as the full moon. The first quarter moons will really shake you up. I would say if someone were like skeptical about astrology, I would say to pay attention to the first quarter moon, because it is so tangible. Everyone is just super energized, especially with a fire first quarter moon like this, and so many other planets in fire and fire signs. You will see Sunday, everyone's just going to be riled up. They're going to be energized, excited. They're going to be maybe stressed or anxious, but there's just so much energy in the air. You can clearly feel it. I've noticed like pets and children in particular really just bounce off the walls, because they, depending on the pets and the kids, I guess, they often have so much energy anyway. But even a human adults as well, you might find that it's harder to sleep. But it's because this energy is trying to shake us up. It's the best energy for starting something new, basically. So this is not a new beginning in the sense of like there's two kinds of new beginnings. There's the new moon, which is much more calm and peaceful, and it's more like when you very first have that new idea, you're planting the seed, right? So it's very quiet. It's very deep and kind of non-physical in nature. But when you go a week forward to the first quarter moon, like we have on Sunday, that's the other kind of new beginning, which is much more literal. It's like, go out there, ask for the promotion, do the thing, like whatever it is, go out there. Like, it's time to act. What's the saying? This is kind of a lame saying, but it's like, don't wait for the fire to be hot, like make it hot by strike, or don't wait for the metal to be hot, make it hot by striking or something. I don't know. It's something like that, right? That's what I'd say for first quarter moon. It's supporting you and being a little impulsive, a little spontaneous. Go out there, do something. If there's nothing that you want to start today, do something where you can release some energy, because otherwise, this is not a good day for relaxing. It's going to be really difficult to kind of just like meditate all day. It's going to be a lot better if you like work out or do something, change something, do something, start something. Okay, and then the very last thing for this week, Pluto does station retrograde on Sunday. Like I mentioned before, this is a very gradual process, so I would not expect. I should be careful with what I say, because you never know what's going to happen these days. But I mean, I was going to say don't expect anything to happen on Sunday. I kind of want to walk that back, though, because let me put it this way. If something happens on Sunday, I would blame it more on the first quarter moon and all this fire that we have, rather than Pluto stationing retrograde. Because Pluto stationing retrograde it's very gradual. It's very slow. It's, even if you look at the fractions of the degree, like the minutes of each degree, the minutes are not changing. So like if I look at the start of the week, Pluto's at 48 minutes of the third, or of the fourth degree technically of Aquarius. So it only moves 1 minute in that week. So that means that it's only going to move 1 minute in the next week as well. So Pluto is just moving so like infinitesimally small. It's not like a sudden, it was going direct and it's suddenly moving retrograde. Pluto barely moves at all, as you know, at this point. But it is worth mentioning because that does suggest things kind of moving backward, at least in a very long-term way. I do still think that this is not going to be very visceral, though, because all the other planets are still direct. So Pluto's really the odd man out, or the odd woman out, I guess you could say. The odd person out, odd planet out. Everything else is still moving direct. Plus being in spring and having all these Aries and Leo energies, I think we're very much moving forward. One very far outer planet moving retrograde is not going to be enough to have us go into that like retrograde phase that you're all familiar with. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, that's pretty much what I have for this week. The only thing I want to kind of close out on saying is just kind of what I was saying earlier. If we look at the chart for next month, for the end of May, there are some exciting things happening. Lots of air and fire, so I hope you like that. And also Saturn will enter Aries on May 24th as well. So I know I'm looking forward to that. I don't know about you, but at any rate, thanks so much for listening to this forecast. I hope it helps you, and I'm definitely happy to be back. And otherwise, have a great week. I'll see you next week.